guys, and welcome back to Mika Reacts and Reviews. We react and review to things on the internet, and today is going to be another non-music reaction. And today we're going to be reacting to Gothix, my girl, my friend in my head, and we're going to be reacting to her video she did is Allies Are Causing More Problems. This video has 104,000 views and it was released a month ago and has 14,000 likes. So after you're done with this video, please go over to her Gothix video and watch her full video. Give her some support and love. And if you don't know what ally is, it's a stupid fucking name and you should just call people decent human beings. But I guess ally are like the intersectionality kind of feminist people who take their time to understand the plight of others and to go out of their way to talk to people in their own community about the plight of others and kind of tiptoe on eggshells and make sure they say everything politically correct and make sure they soothe the feelings and the egos of other people in other communities, publicly whip themselves into submission or something like that, whatever. So we're gonna get into our video, but before we do, please like, comment, and subscribe. Hit that bell to get the notifications when I do upload. All of that helps with the algorithm, guys. And also you can donate if you'd like to support the channel. My PayPal me link is in the description box below and also in the comment section, but you don't have to. You can just sit back, relax, and enjoy the video.
The liberal elements of whites are those who have perfected the art of selling themselves to the Negro as a friend of the Negro, getting sympathy of the Negro, getting the allegiance of the Negro, and getting the mind of the Negro. Then the Negro sides with the white liberal, and the white liberal uses the Negro against the white conservative. So that anything that the Negro does is never for his own good, never for his own advancement, never for his own progress. He's only a pawn in the hands of the white liberal. The worst enemy that the Negro have is the white man that runs around here drooling at the mouth, professing to love Negroes and calling himself a liberal. And it is following these white liberals that has perpetuated problems that Negroes have. If the Negro wasn't taken, tricked, or deceived by the white liberal, the Negroes would get together and solve our own problems. What you just heard was part of a speech delivered by Malcolm X in 1963, more than half a century ago. Here's another quote that's a little bit more recent. In 2013, Thomas Sowell, a black economist, had this to say: "There is no question that liberals do an impressive job expressing concerns for blacks. But do the intentions expressed in their words match the actual consequences of their deeds?" Both Malcolm and Tom Sowell are only two of the many prominent figures in black history who have made observations about white liberals and their allyship with blacks. In present time, I don't have to look very far before concluding the same. One of the most eye-opening observations that I had recently was experiencing racism from the very people who claim to advocate against racism. Black lives matter unless you vote for Trump. Black lives matter, but only if you vote Democrat. Black lives matter, but only if you believe every black American is systematically oppressed. And as I mentioned in my Race Hustler video, Black America appears to be split into two categories. Those that believe that all the problems Black Americans face are the result of slavery, discrimination, and systemic racism. And then we have those that believe that most problems Black Americans face can be resolved by Black America. All
right. Before we continue, she is saying a lot and dropping some truth bombs. Well, how she was saying Negro was like hitting hard. I understand why she was emphasizing the Negro part, because it was a Malcolm X quote, and back in the day, that is how they refer to black people or African Americans or whatever you want to call us, them, our community, whatever. When it comes to white allyship or white guilt or just like the white people on the internet claiming to love all black people and want to be there for black communities, brown communities, LGBTQ, disabled, fat positivity or whatever, a lot of them again are just doing that for a virtue signal and just doing that for validation, doing that so they can sort of have some pseudo look like they're a good people, get likes, clicks, loves, and money. But however, I do think on a larger scale, when it comes to the people running the show, the real ones running the show, I honestly think they are racist. I think it's another form of racism. Like in this day and age, you can't be blatantly racist, right? you have to kind of do it undercover. So what other great way to be racist is to keep the Black community down by having to perpetuate a mindset that keeps them stuck in the past and keeps them from moving forward. What's a better way to be racist to get the Black community to constantly vote for parties and politicians that keep hurting the Black community themselves? What better way to be racist to keep the Black community perpetuating toxicity in the Black community by promoting Black entertainment that is toxic and dumbed down, right? Well, a lot of white allies or whatever, allies in all the other sort of oppressed groups, I feel like a lot of them are pushing a racist agenda themselves ignorantly without realizing it. And I'm going to continue what else I feel about this, and I'm going to let this play a little bit more so I'm not talking so much between her clip, but let's continue.
I'm sure you can guess which philosophy is more favorable in the mainstream view. Now, if I'm being honest with you, my research is telling me that the oppressed sector of Black America doesn't seem to be the majority. They just happen to be the loudest because they're amplified by predatory politicians, the media, and self-fulfilling activists, while the sector of self-fulfillment, on the other hand, gets buried, ignored, or ostracized. So now that we understand these two sectors, we have the concern of allyship. During last year's peaceful protests, I remember another Black creator referring to me as Gothix Owens. Whatever, I'll take the compliment. He referred to me in this way because he felt the things that I talk about, basically anything on this channel, is problematic for the Black community. This person was mutual friends with a white liberal, and that white liberal expressed their confliction after being caught in the middle of two different philosophies. When I tried explaining the philosophical division in Black America, my friend ultimately decided that my philosophy was the wrong one, thus ending our friendship. It's as if this white liberal had the expectation of me to behave in a certain way that they deemed appropriate in order to validate my existence as a Black person. I don't know about you, but that sounds an awful lot like psychological slavery. Sure, I may not have shackles physically holding me down, but according to Black allies, oppressing my individuality and demanding that I conform and obey to the collective isn't that big of a deal.
Okay, before I continue, first of all, being compared to Candace Owens is really not that bad. It's like, I'm going to compare you to an intellectual individual speaker who's prominent in making a life for herself, and somehow that's an insult. Okay, thanks. So she shouldn't be mad about that, and she's not. Also, the idea of white people telling Black people what they should think, how they should feel, how they should react, what their perspectives should be, how they should vote, how they should live, is fucking ridiculous and the pinnacle of white supremacy and racism within itself. That is just idiotic. And to think that we're on a monolith and we should all think the same is idiotic. So that's another thing. And I also want to say, you know, you've heard the word Uncle Tom. If you've been in these circles, you've heard the word Uncle Tom. Uncle Tom is supposed to be a racist term or a racist slur to throw at Black people who don't go along with the mainstream narrative, who are conservative or Republican or even libertarian, who thinks for themselves, who are individualist, who usually get the word Uncle Tom thrown at them, which is so creative, right? Like they thought of that all by themselves. But if you really think about it, if you know what Uncle Tom stems from, there's some controversy where it comes from, but still, if you know where it stems from, Uncle Tom was basically a house slave who looked over all the other slaves, and he would call out any slaves that were misbehaving and not conforming, or even call out slaves who were trying to run away. Right? So if you really think about it, who really are the Uncle Toms? Because the Black folks who yell and try to criticize and try to publicly shame any Black person who is not behaving and not conforming and not complying to the mainstream narrative that is mostly created by white people, who really are the Uncle Toms here? Because it kind of seems like it's you. It kind of seems like you're projecting a little bit much. Anybody who wants to run away from, a term that Candace Owens coined, the Democratic plantation, anybody who wants to be free, anybody who just no longer want to be mental slaves and think for themselves are the ones who get called out. Not the one, though, if you're going along with the mainstream narrative, if you're praising a bunch of white allies and a bunch of white liberals, then you're That's a good thing, right? But when you're not praising the white allies and the white liberals, and when you're thinking for yourself, then all of a sudden you're an Uncle Tom. But I think you got it a little bit the other way around. I don't like throwing out that label because I think it's weak. But if you really think about who are the real Uncle Toms, it's not us. But let's continue.
And because I refuse to abandon my individuality, not only do I have black liberals comparing me to black conservatives that they've demonized as race traitors, I now have white liberals doing the same because of allyship. So my first question is, how can some people claim they're an ally for black people when they don't fully understand the struggles of black people? Because based on the research that I've done and what I've observed over the years, the real struggle in black America has less to do with white oppressors and more to do with the intolerance to diversity of thought and incentivizing government dependency, which ultimately cultivates victimhood. For example, there have been numerous studies done on the expansion of the welfare state and how it directly contributed to the degradation of black culture. Why is it that the majority of black households in the 60s had both parents in the home, while only 30% of them do today? Why is it that young black women rank the highest for STIs than any other race in America? Why is it that black women abort the most babies? Why is it that black Americans tend to spend more on physical goods and less on financial maintenance, such as investing or building credit? Why is it that programs that are intended to help black America, such as affirmative action, lead to high dropout rates in college? While these straightforward questions may seem too harsh or too critical of black culture, I believe that's the problem, because the truth shouldn't be controversial. Blaming all the ills of black America on the white man system is an easy position to adopt, while self-accountability, on the other hand, requires compromise and change on a personal level.
All right, so yeah, she's right. I understand why people don't like to talk about these things because they're really hard conversations, and it feels like, especially if you do believe the system was built against black people and you're like a white ally or whatever, then it feels like victim shaming to a lot of people, or it feels like you are bullying this culture because, like, you're saying it's all their fault, right? No one's denying history, and no one's denying that history didn't have anything to do where black people are now, but it's definitely not the majority in most of the cause anymore. And so, like, if you really care about someone, like if you have a friend or a sister or a family member or a lover or someone you love and care about, you will tell them the hard truth because you care about them and you want them to do better. Even if they stop being your friend, it doesn't matter to you because you care enough to be like, look, you need a slap in the face and you need to be told what the truth is. When you don't care about something, then you don't care if they keep fucking up and messing up. You don't give a fuck. You don't really love that person. And so if you actually cared about a community, then you hold a mirror up to them and say, look, these are the things you need to change. And it's not everybody. You shouldn't generalize. We are individuals. So it's not everyone, right? And you don't have to be an asshole about it, how you go about saying these things. You have to be understanding like the tone of your voice and how people are going to take it, right? However, I've said this before, a lot of these activists don't do any of their research whatsoever and just perpetuate and parrot a narrative. If you were a real activist, you would do your research because you would actually care and you would want to know the best way to help those people or that community, or just shut the fuck up and stay out of it, right? So I totally agree with her about abortion, about affirmative action. There has been tons of evidence that shows that it does not help in the long term. Psychologically, as a black student, never knowing whether you got in college on your own merits or because of the color of your skin. And plus, if you really aren't on the level of being in a prestigious college, you're not gonna be able to keep up and you'll eventually drop out, which also just is another, stab to your self-esteem and your self-worth and all those things. So everything she says is pretty on point. Yes, poor white people are on welfare more than black people, but there is a lot of evidence that the single parenthood didn't start going on a rise in the black community until they got included into the reformed welfare bill that happened in the 60s, and because they were incentivized not to have fathers in the home. All right, and people don't know this. I did a whole video on this on my other commentary channel. Maybe if I feel like it, I'll put a link to it in my description. But like, there was a lot of debate when that bill was reformed, and there was a politician that actually argued that we should put some of that money into helping the community instead, like building at-risk youth centers, building job training centers, helping them get jobs. Because even though back then the single motherhood was at like 20%, he still saw that as a really big issue and wanted to curb that, right? There was other politicians that told him that single motherhood is in Black culture, and that you trying to keep that from happening, or you trying to talk about that or stop it, is actually racist. So yes, these are what white allies are. This woman who said that, single motherhood, women struggling to raise their own kids, fathers abandoning their children, is Black culture. And to try to stop it is racism. That is what Black allies do. They actually perpetuate toxicity and hardships in Black communities, right? She says something else about how like Black people use villages to raise a child. We don't live in fucking Africa. We live in America, where most people rely on the government, so there is lack of community. So don't sit there and think like, oh yeah, we just create this community together and help you raise each other's kids. Yeah, we do help each other, but most people are trying to fucking survive. So no, you can't have my cheese. I need to feed my fucking kids. So that's not how it goes. So anyway, let's continue.
And because the intolerance to diversity of thought is such a big problem, the factual information that I just provided tends to be viewed as white supremacist or anti-Black talking points. Because let's be real, in the eyes of certain white liberals or white leftists, the Black folks who oppose BLM, voted for Trump, or acknowledge the adverse effects of Black American culture are considered problematic grifters who sold out their race to get a seat at the table with white oppressors. Oh, and apparently we're Uncle Toms too, which is ironic because that insult proves to me that whoever said it doesn't know what the hell they're talking about. The problem with selective allyship isn't exclusive to Black issues. In fact, I find a lot of similarities in other demographics, such as the LGBT, for example. Here's a clip from a recent discussion on my podcast, Subtweet This, where Buck Angel, a transsexual man, explains the different philosophies within the LGBT and how the intolerance to diversity of thought is becoming a bigger problem to the point that the acceptance towards the LGBT is dropping. Take a look.
How can I be anti-Black if I'm speaking for myself?
It's hypocrisy. The whole thing is hypocrisy. You can't say this is a Black space and then not invite certain Black people. You can't say this is a trans space and not invite certain. Exact same thing, you guys.
It's an ideologue space.
Totally family.
Belong to our
it's the same
ideology.
thing that happens to me.
Belong
with
to
the
our
trans community.
cults
Let's have a
and our
trans
religion.
This, but don't invite these people. It's like, what? Don't you want conversation? I don't want to be in a space where we all think alike. I don't want to be in a space where we all agree with each other. I want to have some fucking conversation with you, and I want you to challenge me, because I don't understand, how do people grow if they're not challenged? Yeah. We're not challenging kids anymore.
We're asking for diversity for every single facet except for diversity of thought. That's it.
That's right. Yeah. It's scary.
No, that's dangerous.
It's dangerous beyond belief. How can we not have... Oh God, it sends chills. It does. As a 58-year-old tranny, let me just tell you something. What's happening? How have we lost this space to have conversation and even opposing opinions? I would never expect us to be in this space ever in a million years. And it scares me. And I think, though, that people are pushing back now. And why do I think that? Because people are reaching out to me in big spaces that are media, and saying, hey, wait a minute, we need to start having this conversation because we're starting to see what you've been screaming about. I just did an interview with, I think it's the New York Times, and they were like, so people call you problematic. I'm like, of course they do, because I don't take on the agenda. And they're like, oh, I'm like, yeah, you got to look at the whole picture. My community doesn't want people who are outside. If you're not part of this dialogue or this narrative or this ideology, then you're a bad tranny. And so I'm the bad tranny, and that's full. I'll take that, because
with the bad Negroes.
Yeah, that's right. I'm sure as Black people, you deal with all that same thing. You're supposed to have this way of thinking, this way of being, this, and you're not. Okay, you're Black. Who the fuck? You're also an individual person.
Don't make fun of my headphones.
Choices. I hope your whole identity isn't based on your Blackness.
I always preach that. You know what I say?
No.
I say with this generation now is just, I feel like a lot of people latch onto these labels, and you see people's bios, and they just put like, oh, I'm for this, I'm for that. It's because we don't preach individuality. People are not really into being in tune with themselves and thinking for themselves. And I feel like a lot of people just want to belong to something rather than
It's
like, with
because
our community, and it's just that's why people latch onto labels so much, is because like it's easier to become part of something rather than stand alone and have your own thoughts.
All right, before she continues, if you don't know who Buck Angel was, he was one of the first, not the first, but one of the first trans really activists. I believe he was like a trans porn star. I could be wrong about that. Like, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that might be it. Anyway, he was definitely on the forefront of trans activism way back in the day and opened the doors up for many of the young trans or non-binary or gender fluid, whatever, people that are out there today who should be thanking him for opening the door to those discussions and opening up people's minds to transgender community. But instead, because he identifies as what transgender is or transsexual is as someone with gender dysphoria, he goes with the medical label. And because a lot of people are trying to get rid of that medical label, they basically try to like cancel him. But unfortunately, if you get rid of the medical label, you actually stop any medical or scientific research on this on gender dysphoria that can actually help people in the future. You completely stop any research or any investigation or any other help that people who suffer from gender dysphoria, which I hear is a fucking bitch, from getting any help in the future. Because if you get rid of the medical label, then no more research or investigation or medical studies will continue with it, right? So again, most allies perpetuate negative and toxic things that can actually harm the community that they say they're allies for. All right, let's continue.
The idea of allyship in theory sounds great, but until diversity of thought is respected enough to have these hard conversations, selective allyship will continue to create more problems for the very people they supposedly advocate for.
Whenever it takes a stoppage of something that's going to affect the white man, you find the white liberal absent. But when it involves something that primarily will affect the best interests of black people and black people only, then that white liberal is present. I think you'll find, sir, that there will come a time when black people wake up and become intellectually independent enough to think for themselves, as other humans are intellectually independent enough to think for themselves. Then the black man will think like a black man. And he will feel for other black people. And this new thinking and feeling will cause black people to stick together. And then at that point, you'll have a situation where when you attack one black man, you are attacking all black men. And this type of black thinking will cause all black people to stick together. And this type of thinking also will bring an end to the brutality inflicted upon black people by white people.
All right. That was Malcolm X. I don't know if I agree with the whole like if one black man is hurt, then we all like hurt or something like that, because I'm an individualist. But I still respect him, and he was speaking facts. It is funny how a lot of liberals will only quote early Malcolm X and not later Malcolm X, because the later Malcolm X definitely started to distance himself from the younger self. And I love the other quote that maybe I'll find it and put it here, but Malcolm X says something about how the media would actually have black people loving their enemies because the mainstream media is a fucking lie. I really like that video. What I really feel about allyship is I think that I heard it was like on Dr. Joy Peterson or maybe Michaela Peterson's podcast talking about victim culture and why it's so enticing, because people like to have their victimness validated, right? People like to feel like, yes, like you're right. Like I have a right to be angry. I have a right to be mad. How dare they expect me to do this or do that when I'm traumatized and this happened to me? Like people like to have their victimness validated. I never liked it. I always thought it was really gross and disgusting and made me feel uncomfortable, but a lot of people generally like to have their victimness validated. The only problem with that is that it's a reoccurring validation that needs to be fed, and so they will seek out communities and echo chambers that will constantly feed their victimness, right? Constantly tell them that you have every right to be upset and you have every right to be mad and things should be expected of you and you are owed this and you have a right to be have a chip on your shoulder and you have a right to be entitled because all the things that happen to you. They constantly will find people and seek people people to validate that victimhood, right? And then the white allies are people who post BLM or post bullshit in their Twitter or their social medias because they want, again, validation, they want likes, they want clicks, they want to be able to profit off of it, they want to seem like a good person. Will find people who need their victimhood constantly perpetuated back to them, and so they create almost a parasitic sort of relationship. Like, feed my victim mentality and I'll feed your validation so you can feel like you're doing something great, and then they create these little communities together. And people like me, people like Candace Owens, people like Gothix, and the hundreds of thousands, if not other millions of black people who do think like this, don't feed that parasitic relationship. So the white allies don't need us, don't want us, and don't want us to come around because we do nothing for them. And the people of color or people who are in these oppressed or whatever communities or these minority communities don't need us either, because it keeps them from getting their validation, their victimhood validation, if we tell them that, no, you're not a victim, stop, right? So that's kind of what I feel about the whole thing. I definitely agree with her. I definitely think most allies hurt way more than they help. I don't think a lot of these people are like evil and are trying to do evil intent on purpose. A lot of them are brainwashed by the narrative themselves, but then give into it because they just want validation on the internet. That's what I think. Tell me, guys, what do you think? Please put your comment in the comment section below, whether you want to comment on what I said or what was in the Gothix video. Please like, comment, subscribe, hit that bell to get the notifications when I do upload. All of that helps with the algorithm, guys. And also, if you'd like to support the channel, you can donate. My PayPal link is in the description box below. It's also in the comment section. It helps, but you don't have to. You can just like, comment, and subscribe. I also have a second travel vlog channel if you want to see where I am in the world. I have go in the description box below and also in the comment section. Click on the link, go subscribe to my travel vlog channel, and or follow me on Instagram. My stories is usually what's most up to date, and you guys have an amazing day. Bye.